The billionaire had always been careful with his life, but ever since he became a single father, his caution had doubled. His mansion was grand and elegant, with walls lined with priceless paintings, marble floors that shone in the sunlight, and high ceilings that echoed every step. Yet, despite the beauty, the one thing that kept him awake at night was the safety of his young son. The boy was lively, curious, and full of energy. But his father could not shake the thought of something happening to him. A recent incident in the neighborhood had only heightened the billionaire's fears. A break-in had occurred in the house next door. No one was hurt, but the event sent waves of anxiety through him. He had always trusted security, but now he wanted more than just locks and alarms. He wanted to see everything, to control everything, to make sure that his son would never be in danger. So, he called in the best security team he could find and installed cameras in every corner of the mansion. There were cameras at the gates, in the hallways, in the backyard, and even in the playroom. Every inch was covered. Despite the cameras, he knew he needed help to manage the house and take care of his son. His own work demanded long hours, and he could not be present every moment. That's how the maid came into their lives. She was recommended by someone he trusted. Someone who assured him that she was reliable, kind, and experienced with children. The billionaire, always cautious, interviewed her personally. She answered every question calmly, her voice steady, her eyes honest. There was something about her that felt genuine, but he could not fully let go of his doubts. He needed proof, evidence that she could be trusted with his son. On her first day, the maid entered the mansion carrying a small bag. She looked around with quiet awe, taking in the grandeur without being overwhelmed. The billionaire noticed her composure from behind his monitor screens, his eyes sharp, his mind calculating. She greeted the boy with a soft smile. The boy, who was shy around strangers, looked at her curiously. The maid bent down to his level and spoke in a gentle voice, asking him about his toys and what he liked to do. Slowly, he smiled, the first sign that he was warming up to her presence at first. The billionaire watched from the security feed as she played with his son. She had a way of engaging him, asking him simple questions, laughing at his jokes, and showing interest in the smallest details of his day. The boy began to giggle and run around with her, a sight that the billionaire found both reassuring and strange. He had never seen anyone connect with his son so quickly. He felt a mixture of relief and skepticism. Was this just a front, or was her kindness real? The day went on, and the maid showed her attentiveness in subtle ways. She noticed when the boy's socks were slightly damp from a spilled drink and gently changed them. She cleaned up small messes without making the boy feel scolded or guilty. She organized his toys, but not in a way that stifled his play. Every action she took seemed natural, thoughtful, and considerate. The billionaire continued to watch, his mind slowly relaxing as he saw her patience and care. He realized that she wasn't just performing tasks. She was building a connection with his son. As evening approached, the boy grew tired and restless. He wanted to climb on the furniture and explore areas that were off-limits. The billionaire tensed up, ready to intervene through a call to the maid. But she noticed immediately. With a calm voice, she explained gently why some areas were unsafe and redirected him to a safer activity. The boy listened, not because he was afraid, but because he trusted her. The billionaire watched this interaction closely, pressed by her ability to manage his son with kindness rather than strictness. During dinner, the maid served food for the boy and helped him eat without fuss. She encouraged him to try new foods, all the while keeping the atmosphere light and playful. The boy laughed more in that one evening than he had in weeks. The billionaire, observing quietly, felt a warmth he hadn't realized he was missing. He had been so focused on safety, on rules, on precautions, that he had not noticed how much his son needed care, attention, and affection. Later that night, after the boy was asleep, the billionaire walked through the mansion. Checking the rooms himself, he paused outside the boy's room, reflecting on the day. The maid had proven herself more than competent, yet he still felt the tug of caution. He knew he could not fully trust someone overnight. Trust, he reminded himself, had to be earned over time. And yet he could not deny the relief he felt seeing his son happy and safe. the maid. Meanwhile, stayed up a little later than usual, quietly tidying up and making small preparations for the next day. She did not see the cameras, did not realize she was being watched. Her actions were instinctive, driven by genuine care rather than the need to impress. She hummed softly to herself, thinking about how much the boy reminded her of her own younger brother. She had faced hardships in her life, but she had always found joy in helping others, especially children. There was a quiet strength in her kindness, patience that came from experience and empathy. In the days that followed, the routine settled in. The boy grew more comfortable with the maid, often running to her with excitement as she entered the room. The billionaire continued to watch through his screens, sometimes feeling a twinge of guilt for his constant surveillance. He started noticing small gestures, the way the maid would soothe his son when he was frustrated, the way she celebrated his little victories, the way she anticipated his needs before he even expressed them. One afternoon, the boy had a small accident. He tripped while running across the living room and scraped his knee. The billionaire, watching from the monitor, felt his heart race. The maid reacted instantly. She picked him up gently, examined the wound, cleaned it with care, and applied a bandage. She comforted him, speaking softly and distracting him with a story. The boy's cries faded into sniffles, and he soon began to laugh again. The billionaire felt a lump in his throat. He realized in that moment that the maid's presence had become more than just helpful. She had become a protector, someone whose instincts were guided by love and concern rather than duty. The billionaire spent that night thinking deeply. He walked through the mansion, checking the cameras one last time before bed. He considered the value of wealth, of security systems, of walls and alarms. None of it mattered as much as human kindness. Watching the maid care for his son, he felt a shift inside him. Maybe he thought there were people who could be trusted, people whose love could reach where technology could not. As he finally settled into bed, he reflected on the day. The mansion was quiet, the lights dim, and his son was asleep peacefully. He knew the road ahead would require patience, observation, and careful judgment. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps his son could grow up happy, safe, and loved, even in a world that often seemed cautious and fearful. And maybe, just maybe, the maid who had walked into their lives so quietly would prove to be a gift far greater than he had imagined. The next morning, the mansion was quiet except for the soft sounds of birds outside the tall windows. The billionaire walked through the hallways, his mind still replaying the previous day. He felt a strange mixture of relief and caution. Relief because his son seemed genuinely happy around the maid, and caution because he still could not fully trust anyone with his child. As he paused in the kitchen, he noticed the maid moving gracefully, preparing breakfast with care. She had laid out colorful plates with fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, and toast arranged in shapes that made the boy laugh when he saw them. The boy bounded into the kitchen, his hair messy and his pajamas crumpled. He immediately ran to the maid, shouting happily about a dream he had the night before. The maid knelt down, listening attentively, her eyes sparkling with interest. She asked questions about the dream, encouraging him to describe every detail. The boy's laughter filled the room, and the billionaire watched from the doorway. Hidden for the moment, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not expected. Breakfast was a lively affair. The boy was chatty and animated, telling stories and asking endless questions. The maid answered each one with patience and creativity. When he tried to climb onto the counter to see the toaster more closely, she gently held his hands and redirected him to the table, explaining why it could be dangerous. The boy accepted this calmly, more interested in the stories she told than the appliance. The billionaire realized that the maid had a way of teaching and protecting without ever making the child feel constrained or scared. After breakfast, the boy wanted to play in the backyard. The billionaire, still hesitant, reminded him to stay close. The maid held his hand and guided him carefully, keeping an eye out for potential hazards. She pointed out the flowers, letting him smell each one, teaching him the names of birds that flew by, and laughing at his small attempts to imitate them. The boy's curiosity and energy were boundless, but the maid matched his pace, ensuring that every step was safe and enjoyable. While they played, the billionaire watched from the security cameras, noting every move. He saw how the maid allowed the boy freedom while maintaining safety. She let him explore, climb, and run, but she was always nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. There was a quiet confidence in her actions. It's a blend of caution and love that reassured him without him having to speak a single word. Later in the morning, the maid suggested a small art activity. She pulled out crayons, paper, and paints, encouraging the boy to create anything he wanted. The boy was hesitant at first, unsure of what to draw, but the maid's gentle guidance sparked his imagination. He drew colorful shapes, smiling faces, and imaginary creatures, explaining each one in detail. The maid praised his creativity, making him feel proud of his work. The billionaire watched the interaction, amazed at how her encouragement brought out a side of his son he had rarely seen. During lunchtime, the maid continued to demonstrate her care. She had prepared a simple, healthy meal, but she arranged it in a way that made it exciting for the boy. She sat with him, engaging in conversation, asking about his favorite parts of the morning and listening patiently. The boy ate happily, his energy never waning, while the billionaire observed with a mixture of awe and relief. He realized that she was not just providing basic care. She was nurturing his son's happiness, curiosity, and confidence. In the afternoon, the boy became restless again, wanting to explore the mansion further. The maid suggested a treasure hunt inside the house, hiding small objects for him to find. The boy's eyes lit up, and he eagerly began the game, searching high and low, laughing at every discovery. The maid joined in the fun, pretending to be surprised by his finds, making the game feel magical. The billionaire, monitoring from his office, felt a twinge of guilt for watching so closely. Yet, he could not deny the joy on his son's face and the skillful way the maid handled the activity. A small incident occurred when the boy reached for a vase on a shelf. The billionaire's heart skipped a beat as he saw the vase wobble dangerously. The maid reacted instantly, stepping forward and gently guiding his hands away from the fragile item. She explained why it could break and how it could be dangerous, but she did so in a calm and friendly tone. The boy listened, nodded, and continued playing elsewhere. The billionaire felt a deep respect for her attentiveness and quick thinking. As the afternoon turned into evening, the maid read a story to the boy. She used different voices for each character, making the story come alive. The boy was captivated, sitting cross-legged and leaning forward. She encouraged him to guess what might happen next, to think about the character's feelings, and to share his thoughts. The billionaire, observing from a hidden corner, was struck by how her kindness was not passive. It was active, engaging, and thoughtful. She was shaping his son's mind and heart with every word. Dinner that night was another display of her gentle care. She helped the boy with his meal, encouraging him to try new foods, but never forcing him. She laughed with him when he made small mistakes, turning potential frustration into moments of learning and joy. The billionaire watched quietly, feeling a growing sense of trust. He still had reservations, but he could not ignore the evidence of her genuine affection and competence. After dinner, the boy was tired but restless, wanting to play one last game before bed. The maid suggested a calm activity, drawing shapes and colors in a notebook, and the boy agreed happily. She praised his creativity, and he beamed with pride. The billionaire realized that the maid had a natural talent for balancing discipline and freedom, safety and fun, teaching and nurturing. Later that night, after the boy was asleep, the billionaire walked through the mansion once more. He paused outside the boy's room, reflecting on the day. The maid had proven herself more than he expected. She had shown patience, creativity, attentiveness, and above all, genuine kindness. The billionaire understood that her presence was more than a service. It was a gift. She had brought laughter, joy, and care into a home that had been filled with caution and silence. The maid stayed up quietly, tidying the playroom and organizing the boy's belongings. She hummed softly to herself, thinking about how much the boy reminded her of children she had cared for in the past. She did not notice the billionaire watching from the shadows, nor did she think about the surveillance cameras. Her actions were instinctive, motivated by a sincere desire to care for the child. The next morning, the routine continued. The boy eagerly awaited the maid's arrival, running to greet her with a wide smile. The billionaire noticed the change in his son, the way he approached the day with excitement and trust. The maid encouraged him to explore, to learn, and to enjoy each moment, and he responded with joy and curiosity. The billionaire felt a subtle shift within himself, an understanding that safety alone was not enough. Love, care, and genuine attention were equally, if not more important. Days passed, and small moments continued to build the bond between the boy and the maid. She taught him songs, helped him with puzzles, and celebrated even the tiniest achievements. The boy began to look forward to her presence, and his laughter echoed through the mansion, a sound that brought warmth to the billionaire's heart. He began to see her not as a hired helper, but as someone who could touch his son's life in ways himself could not. The billionaire's skepticism slowly started to fade. While he still kept the cameras, he found himself checking less often. He noticed that no matter what he observed, the maid acted with care and thoughtfulness. The boy was happy, safe, and growing in confidence. The billionaire realized that her influence was shaping his son's world in a positive, lasting way. As the days went on, the bond between the boy and the maid grew stronger. Every morning, the boy would run to her with a smile, eager to share his thoughts. His small discoveries were a joke he had just invented. The maid always met his energy with warmth and attention, asking questions, listening, and encouraging him to express himself. The billionaire watched from the surveillance cameras, a quiet observer of a growing connection that he had not anticipated. One morning, the boy came running into the kitchen, holding a small toy car tightly in his hand. He told the maid excitedly that he wanted to build a track in the living room, and she immediately agreed, helping him arrange cushions, books, and boxes to create a makeshift ramp. She guided him carefully, making sure nothing was unsafe, but she allowed him to lead the design. The boy's face lit up with pride as he tested the track, adjusting it with the maid's help. The billionaire watched in amazement at how naturally she balanced safety and creativity. Later that day, the boy became frustrated while trying to solve a puzzle. He wanted to give up, but the maid knelt beside him, speaking softly and offering gentle encouragement. She asked questions that made him think, guiding him without giving the answers. Slowly, the boy's expression changed from frustration to determination. And eventually, he completed the puzzle with a triumphant smile. The maid clapped and celebrated with him, making him feel proud of his achievement. The billionaire observed silently, feeling a mixture of pride and gratitude for the maid's patience and understanding. The afternoon brought an unexpected challenge. The boy, curious as always, wandered toward the stairs without noticing a small spill that made the floor slippery. The billionaire's heart raced as he watched on the monitor. The maid, however, was alert and reacted instantly. She grabbed his hand just as he slipped, steadying him and guiding him safely back to the play area. She cleaned the spill quickly and calmly, explaining to the boy why it was dangerous, but in a kind and non-threatening way. The billionaire felt a deep sense of relief. He realized that her instincts and attentiveness went far beyond mere duty. She truly cared for his son's safety and well-being. That evening, the maid noticed that the boy seemed a bit sad. He had been missing his mother, and a quiet longing was visible in his eyes. She sat down beside him, gently holding his hand, and asked him to share his feelings. The boy hesitated at first, but the maid's calm presence encouraged him to open up. He spoke about his mother, about the things he missed, and about how he sometimes felt lonely despite the luxurious surroundings. The maid listened carefully, nodding and offering comforting words. She reassured him that his feelings were normal and that it was okay to miss someone he loved. The billionaire, watching through the camera, felt a lump in his throat. He had never realized how much emotional support his son needed. He could see that the maid was providing it in a way he could not. Over the next few days, the maid continued to create small, thoughtful activities that helped the boy express himself and develop confidence. She encouraged him to draw pictures of his dreams, to act out little plays, and to tell stories about his imaginary adventures. The boy's imagination blossomed under her guidance, and his laughter became a constant presence in the mansion. The billionaire noticed that his son was more confident, more cheerful, and more willing to try new things. He began to understand that the maid's kindness was not just about attending to his son's needs. It was about nurturing his growth. One afternoon, the maid suggested a small gardening activity. She brought out pots, soil, and seeds, and the boy eagerly joined her in planting. She taught him how to handle the soil carefully, how to water the plants, and how to be patient while waiting for them to grow. The boy asked endless questions, and the maid answered each one with enthusiasm and clarity. The billionaire watched from the office, impressed by her ability to turn a simple activity into a lesson about responsibility, patience, and care. He realized that her influence extended beyond immediate safety. She was teaching his son values that would stay with him for life. Later, the boy wanted to explore the mansion's library, a vast room filled with books from floor to ceiling. The maid accompanied him, helping him reach lower shelves and guiding him to age-appropriate stories. She read aloud, using different voices and expressions, bringing the characters to life. The boy listened attentively, asking questions and sharing his thoughts about the story. The billionaire, observing quietly, felt a growing admiration for the maid's ability to engage his son intellectually and emotionally. An important moment came when the boy faced a minor fear. He had always been afraid of the dark and hesitated to go to bed alone. The maid noticed his unease and sat with him, speaking softly, telling him stories, and using a small nightlight to make the room feel safe. She stayed until he felt comfortable and finally fell asleep, holding his favorite toy. The billionaire watched this interaction, realizing that true protection was not just about surveillance and caution, but about understanding, compassion, and reassurance. The maid's attentiveness extended to small, unnoticed details. She noticed when the boy's shoes were uncomfortable, when he was hungry between meals, or when he was tired but reluctant to rest. She addressed each need promptly and gently, often anticipating his requirements before he even voiced them. The billionaire began to recognize that her intuition and attentiveness were exceptional, and he felt a growing sense of trust. He still monitored through the cameras, but he began to rely less on constant observation. Realizing that she had earned his confidence through consistent care and understanding, one rainy afternoon, the boy felt confined and restless. The maid suggested an indoor scavenger hunt, hiding small objects around the house and giving him clues to find them. The boy's excitement was infectious, and he eagerly searched every corner, laughing when he found each item. The maid celebrated his success, encouraging him to describe his finds and tell imaginative stories about them. The billionaire watched, amazed at how effortlessly she turned a rainy day into an adventure, keeping his son engaged, happy, and safe. Throughout this time, the billionaire observed subtle changes in his own feelings. He realized that the constant surveillance he had relied on was no longer enough to guarantee peace of mind. He saw that the maid's genuine care, her attentiveness, and her ability to connect emotionally with his son provided a level of security and comfort that no camera could offer. Slowly, he began to relax, allowing himself to trust her more. While still maintaining vigilance in his own way, evenings were filled with small, meaningful rituals. The maid encouraged the boy to reflect on his day, to express gratitude, and to share something he had learned or enjoyed. These simple practices helped the boy develop self-awareness and emotional intelligence. The billionaire, watching through the monitor, was quietly astonished by the depth of her influence. He understood that her presence was shaping his son's character in a positive and lasting way. One night, the boy became sick with a mild fever. The billionaire's concern spiked, but the maid handled the situation calmly and efficiently. She checked his temperature, gave him medicine as instructed, and made sure he was comfortable. She stayed by his side, soothing him with gentle words and careful attention. The boy's discomfort eased, and he drifted into a peaceful sleep under her watchful care. The billionaire felt a deep sense of gratitude, realizing that her dedication went far beyond ordinary duties. She had become a protector and caregiver in the truest sense. Through all these experiences, the billionaire began to notice a pattern. The maid's kindness was consistent, unwavering, and sincere. She did not seek recognition or reward. She acted out of genuine concern and empathy. The boy responded to her love and guidance with trust, affection, and joy. The billionaire understood that this was something he could never achieve alone, no matter how vigilant or wealthy he was. Her presence brought balance, warmth, and emotional security to their lives. The days grew brighter, with the laughter of the boy echoing through the mansion. The maid had become a constant presence in his life, not just attending to his needs but nurturing his spirit. She had an uncanny ability to sense his moods, to know when he needed attention or when he needed to be left to explore on his own. Every small act of hers seemed to weave a safety net of care around him, one that was invisible yet unbreakable. One morning the maid noticed that the boy was unusually quiet during breakfast. He poked at his food without much interest, a rare sight for such an energetic child. She asked gently if something was bothering him, and after a pause, he confessed that he missed playing with other children his age. The maid listened patiently, understanding that his life of privilege often isolated him from peers. She suggested organizing a small playdate, reaching out discreetly to a trusted family friend with a child of similar age. The boy's eyes lit up with excitement at the idea, and the maid began planning the afternoon activity with careful thought. When the playdate began, the boy was hesitant at first, unsure how to interact with another child. The maid stayed close, guiding him subtly without imposing. She encouraged him to share toys, take turns, and express his feelings when conflicts arose. The boy quickly warmed to the experience, laughing and running freely, and the maid joined in the fun, making the game lively and enjoyable. The billionaire watched from his office, observing the joy on his son's face. He was amazed at how the maid's gentle guidance allowed his son to navigate social interactions with confidence and ease. Later that week, the maid noticed the boy showing an interest in music. He tapped on surfaces rhythmically and sang little songs he had made up. She decided to nurture this interest by bringing a small keyboard and percussion instruments. She encouraged him to experiment with sounds, to create his own melodies, and to express himself through music. The boy became absorbed, his face glowing with concentration and delight. The billionaire, monitoring from afar, felt a wave of admiration for the maid's ability to cultivate creativity, maintaining a sense of structure and safety. On another day, the boy became frustrated while building a complex tower of blocks. He wanted it to be perfect and grew upset when it kept falling. The maid knelt beside him, offering calm reassurance. She suggested strategies, encouraged patience, and celebrated small victories along the way. Slowly, the boy learned to persist, finding joy in the process rather than only in the result. The billionaire observed, struck by how the maid's encouragement was shaping his son's resilience and problem-solving skills. The maid's kindness extended beyond planned activities. She noticed subtle signs of discomfort or anxiety and addressed them thoughtfully. When the boy hesitated to try a new food, she made it fun by turning it into a game, praising him for each small bite. When he was nervous about a loud thunderstorm, she stayed close, telling stories and providing comfort until he felt safe. The billionaire began to see that her attention to detail and emotional intelligence were extraordinary. She was teaching his son how to navigate the world with confidence, empathy, and patience. One afternoon, the boy wanted to explore the mansion's attic, a space filled with old furniture and forgotten items. The billionaire tensed at the thought of potential dangers, but the maid approached the situation calmly. She guided the boy carefully, showing him which areas were safe and which were not. She encouraged him to explore, examine old toys, and imagine stories about the past. The boy's eyes sparkled with curiosity and excitement, and he listened intently to the maid's stories about the items they found. The billionaire, watching from the camera feed, felt a sense of relief and admiration. She had created a safe space for adventure, blending caution with freedom. Evenings were filled with storytelling and quiet reflection. The maid encouraged the boy to share his thoughts, to talk about his day, and to express gratitude for small joys. She celebrated his achievements, no matter how minor, and comforted him in moments of disappointment. The billionaire observed these interactions and realized that her influence was shaping not only his son's behavior, but also his emotional well-being. The boy was learning to navigate his feelings, to communicate effectively, and to develop empathy. A particularly memorable moment occurred when the boy became upset over a minor disagreement with the maid. He wanted to do something a certain way, and she suggested a different approach. The boy cried in frustration, but the maid remained calm. She listened to his concerns, validated his feelings, and gently guided him toward understanding and compromise. In the end, the boy learned to respect another perspective while still feeling heard. The billionaire watched this with awe, recognizing that such lessons in empathy and communication were priceless. The maid also found ways to connect with the boy's imagination in creative ways. She organized small puppet shows, encouraged him to write short stories, and helped him craft simple art projects. Each activity was designed to engage his mind, nurture his creativity, and provide joy. The boy looked forward to these moments, often asking what they would do next. The billionaire noticed that these experiences brought out the best in his son, helping him grow in confidence, happiness, and emotional intelligence. One rainy day, the boy felt cooped up and restless. The maid suggested a sensory activity indoors, using textures, colors, and sounds to create an interactive learning experience. The boy was fascinated, experimenting with each element, and the maid guided him through explanations and imaginative storytelling. She celebrated his discoveries, praised his creativity, and encouraged him to share his thoughts. The billionaire watched, realizing that the maid was teaching his son to explore, question, and engage with the world in meaningful ways. As the days passed, the boy's bond with the maid grew even stronger. He began to confide in her about small worries, fears, and dreams. She listened patiently, offering guidance, comfort, and encouragement. He began to trust her completely, knowing that she would care for him with honesty and understanding. The billionaire noticed the transformation, understanding that this trust and bond could not have been achieved through supervision alone. It required genuine kindness, patience, and empathy. The maid's influence extended beyond immediate care. She began teaching the boy important life skills, such as tidiness, responsibility, and consideration for others. She encouraged him to help with small household tasks, to organize his toys, and to show kindness to pets or visiting family. The boy responded eagerly, enjoying the sense of accomplishment and the praise that came with his efforts. The billionaire watched, impressed by her ability to shape not only his son's happiness but also his character. One evening, the boy fell asleep holding a small toy he had received as a reward from the maid for his efforts during the day. The billionaire paused outside the room, reflecting on the transformation he had witnessed. The boy had become more confident, more expressive, and more emotionally resilient. The maid had done more than care for him. She had become a guide, a mentor, and a source of unconditional support. The billionaire realized that true safety and growth came not from surveillance alone, but from genuine human connection and understanding. As the weeks turned into months, the bond between the maid and the boy became inseparable. Every day brought new laughter, discoveries, and lessons. And the boy began to look forward to her presence as the most exciting part of his day. She had become more than a caregiver. She was a mentor, a friend, and a source of unconditional support. The billionaire observed quietly, still cautious at times, but increasingly aware that her influence on his son was transforming his world in ways money and technology could never achieve. One afternoon, the boy expressed a desire to learn more about animals. The maid immediately engaged him in a hands-on activity. She gathered books, pictures, and small figurines, creating a mini-animal discovery session in the living room. The boy was captivated, asking endless questions about each animal's habits, homes, and sounds. The maid encouraged him to draw his favorite animals and tell imaginative stories about them. The billionaire, watching from his office, felt a profound respect for the maid's ability to nurture curiosity, learning, and imagination simultaneously. The boy's confidence continued to grow. He began to try new things, from climbing safely on playground equipment to attempting small chores around the house. The maid encouraged him at every step, praising effort rather than perfection, and celebrating small victories. She taught him the value of patience, persistence, and kindness, often using gentle examples from her own experiences. The boy absorbed these lessons naturally, growing more independent, empathetic, and resilient with each passing day. One evening, the boy came home from a visit to a neighbor with a scraped knee. The billionaire's heart raced, but the maid immediately took action. She cleaned the wound with care, applied a bandage, and comforted the boy with a soft voice and reassuring words. She encouraged him to share what had happened and asked questions that made him reflect on how to stay safe in the future. The boy listened attentively, comforted not only by her actions, but also by the care and attention she gave to his feelings. The billionaire watched in quiet admiration. Recognizing that her protective instincts were matched only by her empathy, the maid also found ways to teach the boy important life lessons through play and storytelling. She created little scenarios in which he had to solve problems, make decisions, and consider the feelings of others. These activities, while fun and engaging, also taught him accountability, compassion, and reasoning. The boy eagerly participated, and the lessons stuck naturally, shaping his character without the need for lectures or discipline. The billionaire realized that this kind of influence was far more impactful than strict rules or constant monitoring. One rainy afternoon, the boy was feeling restless and disappointed that he could not play outside. The maid suggested an indoor science experiment. Using simple household items to explore concepts like water flow, magnets, and floating objects, the boy's eyes lit up with curiosity as he conducted each experiment, asking questions and making observations. The maid guided him patiently, encouraging him to think critically and creatively. By the end of the activity, the boy was exhilarated, and the billionaire watched with awe as the maid turned a mundane day into an unforgettable learning experience. As the bond between the boy and the maid grew, so did his trust in her. He began to confide in her about his worries, his dreams, and his feelings about missing his mother. She listened without judgment, offering comfort, guidance, and reassurance. She validated his emotions and helped him find constructive ways to express them. The boy felt safe sharing his deepest thoughts. And in turn, he grew emotionally stronger, more self-aware, and more resilient. The billionaire observed, realizing that her care was providing a foundation that no security system could ever offer. The maid's influence extended to small everyday responsibilities as well. She encouraged the boy to tidy up his toys, help with simple household chores, and care for pets. She praised his efforts, making him feel capable and proud. Through these small acts, the boy learned responsibility, cooperation, and the joy of helping others. The billionaire, watching quietly, began to understand that these lessons were shaping his son into a thoughtful, capable, and caring individual. One memorable afternoon, the boy grew frustrated trying to build a large block tower. He wanted it to be perfect, but it kept falling. The maid sat beside him, guiding him with gentle words. She encouraged him to think creatively about the design, to try again when he failed, and to enjoy the process rather than the result. Slowly, the boy's frustration turned to determination and delight as he completed the tower. The maid celebrated his success, and the boy beamed with pride. The billionaire, witnessing this interaction, realized how her guidance was teaching resilience, patience, and problem-solving in a way that no amount of supervision could achieve. The maid's attention to the boy's emotional needs was unwavering. She noticed subtle signs of anxiety, fatigue, or sadness, and responded with empathy and care. When the boy was nervous about a loud thunderstorm, she stayed close, told calming stories, and helped him feel safe. When he was worried about an upcoming play date, she guided him through social interactions, teaching patience, kindness, and confidence. The billionaire observed these moments, understanding that her attentiveness and emotional intelligence were shaping his son's ability to navigate life with courage and empathy. Evenings were often filled with storytelling, quiet reflection, and gentle conversation. The maid encouraged the boy to talk about his day, share his thoughts, and express gratitude for small joys. She celebrated his achievements, comforted him in moments of disappointment, and helped him develop emotional awareness. The billionaire, watching from a distance, felt a deep sense of respect and gratitude for the maid's consistent and genuine care. He realized that her influence was not just immediate but lasting, shaping his son's character and emotional resilience. One particularly meaningful moment occurred when the boy expressed concern for a small, injured bird he had found outside. The maid guided him in gently caring for the bird, teaching him empathy, responsibility, and patience. Together, they nurtured the bird until it was ready to fly again. The boy's pride and joy were evident, and the billionaire watched, deeply moved by the maid's ability to teach compassion through real-life experiences. As the weeks continued, the boy's happiness and confidence grew steadily. He laughed more, explored more, and expressed himself more freely. The maid had become an irreplaceable presence, a source of love, guidance, and protection. The billionaire began to relax, realizing that trust, empathy, and genuine care were far more valuable than constant surveillance. The mansion, once a place of strict rules and caution, had become a home filled with laughter, learning, and warmth. One evening, as the boy drifted off to sleep holding a small toy given by the maid, the billionaire stood outside his room, reflecting on the journey so far. He understood that his son had grown not just in safety, but in emotional strength, creativity, and joy. The maid had become an integral part of their lives, shaping his son's character with patience, love, and wisdom. He realized that the true gift she had given them was not just care, but the ability to thrive emotionally, mentally, and socially. As the days turned into months, the bond between the boy, the maid, and the billionaire grew stronger, deeper, and more meaningful. The mansion, once a silent and cautious place filled with alarms and cameras, had transformed into a lively home where laughter, curiosity, and warmth filled the rooms. The boy thrived under the maid's guidance, learning to navigate life with joy, empathy, and confidence, while the billionaire slowly began to let go of constant vigilance, trusting the genuine care that had become an integral part of their lives. One morning, the boy woke with excitement in his eyes. He had discovered a small patch of sunlight in the garden where he wanted to play. The maid smiled, noticing his enthusiasm, and suggested they set up a little nature exploration activity. Together they examined plants, insects, and tiny puddles from the morning dew. She encouraged the boy to ask questions, to touch and observe gently, and to imagine stories about the creatures they found. He giggled as a ladybug crawled on his hand, and the maid praised him for being careful and curious at the same time. The billionaire watched from his office monitor, amazed at how the maid transformed simple moments into learning experiences. Later, the maid noticed the boy becoming curious about cooking. She decided to involve him in preparing a simple snack. Together, they mashed fruits, made sandwiches, and arranged colorful plates. The boy was fascinated by each step, and the maid explained the process patiently, teaching him hygiene, safety, and creativity in the kitchen. The boy tasted each creation proudly, and the maid celebrated his small successes, emphasizing effort over perfection. The billionaire, observing quietly, realized that these everyday activities were shaping his son's independence, confidence, and sense of responsibility. In the afternoons, the boy often wanted to explore indoors, especially when the weather was less favorable. The maid arranged imaginative adventures, turning the library into a castle, the living room into a jungle, and the hallways into obstacle courses. She encouraged the boy to create stories, solve problems, and work collaboratively with imaginary companions. Every activity was designed to teach him critical thinking, patience, and emotional awareness while keeping it fun. The boy's laughter and excitement filled the mansion, and the billionaire felt a sense of pride and gratitude that he had not anticipated. One day, the boy faced a challenge that tested his emotional growth. He had built a tall tower of blocks, but it collapsed unexpectedly. Frustrated, he began to cry. The maid knelt beside him, listening patiently, and validated his feelings. She encouraged him to try again, guiding him gently while allowing him to make his own choices. Slowly, the boy's tears turned into determination, and he rebuilt the tower with pride. The maid praised his resilience and effort, reinforcing the lesson that mistakes were opportunities to learn. The billionaire watched with admiration, recognizing that this emotional guidance was teaching his son far more than simple safety ever could. The boy also began to show compassion for others, quality the maid nurtured with care. When a stray cat appeared near the garden, he wanted to help it. The maid guided him in approaching the animal gently, providing food and shelter, and explaining how to care for living creatures responsibly. The boy learned empathy, patience, and the joy of helping others, lessons that extended beyond the mansion's walls. The billionaire observed, deeply moved, realizing that these experiences were shaping a compassionate and thoughtful young boy. As the months progressed, the maid continued to find creative ways to engage the boy's mind and heart. She encouraged him to draw, paint, write stories, and explore nature. She celebrated his achievements, comforted him in moments of disappointment, and provided guidance when he faced challenges. The boy grew more confident, imaginative, and emotionally intelligent. The billionaire, once focused solely on surveillance and caution, began to understand that these qualities were far more valuable than any security system could provide. One afternoon, the boy expressed interest in music. The maid introduced him to simple instruments, guiding him in creating rhythms and melodies. She encouraged him to experiment, compose small tunes, and perform little concerts for the family. The boy's face lit up with pride and joy as he shared his creations, and the maid celebrated his efforts, emphasizing creativity over skill. The billionaire watched, amazed at how the maid nurtured not only his son's talents, but also his confidence and self-expression. Evenings were often filled with quiet reflection, storytelling, and gentle conversation. The maid encouraged the boy to share his thoughts about the day, express gratitude, and reflect on his experiences. She provided comfort when he felt sad or anxious, celebrated his small victories, and guided him through problem-solving with patience and empathy. The billionaire observed these interactions and realized that her care was fostering emotional resilience and intelligence that would serve his son for a lifetime. One particularly memorable moment occurred when the boy was nervous about trying a new activity. Swimming in the mansion's pool, he hesitated at the edge, unsure of his abilities. The maid stayed close, offering encouragement, demonstrating techniques, and reassuring him gently. Slowly, the boy gained confidence, entering the water with a smile. He splashed and played, laughing freely, while the maid guided him safely. The billionaire watched from a distance, realizing that trust, encouragement, and genuine care had achieved what rules and surveillance never could. The maid's influence extended beyond immediate activities and lessons. She taught the boy to care for his belongings, show kindness to others, and take pride in small accomplishments. She celebrated curiosity, nurtured creativity, and emphasized empathy. The boy responded eagerly, his growth evident in his increasing independence, confidence, and thoughtfulness. The billionaire observed quietly, gradually letting go of constant monitoring, understanding that her presence provided a level of safety and guidance. Far beyond technology, the boy's relationship with the maid became one of trust and mutual affection. He confided in her about small worries, fears, and dreams, and she responded with patience, guidance, and comfort. She helped him navigate emotions, social interactions, and challenges with care and wisdom. The billionaire saw his son thriving emotionally and intellectually and felt a deep gratitude for the maid's unwavering dedication. One rainy day, the boy was restless and bored. The maid suggested a creative indoor activity using colors, textures, and sounds to engage his imagination. She guided him in experimenting with materials, telling stories, and exploring new ideas. The boy laughed, asked questions, and shared his discoveries. The activity turned a dull day into a joyful, educational experience. The billionaire watched with admiration, realizing that her creativity and attentiveness had a profound impact on his son's growth and happiness.